Hi friends, we're back. We're in the lair. Woohoo. So, I feel like a little munchkin in this lair. To explain the context, this is the Oxybenzone magazine that I have been talking about and referencing very often. I can show you quick. So this is part 1, which is online at savethecorals.club/oxybenzone. That's it. savethecorals.club, club, one club, but it's club, not com, and then /oxybenzone, spelled like so. So here I explain, sorry, I have my phone charging on an external here. In the meantime, here we have the history of oxybenzone, my little intro, author's note, global health emergency, what they're not telling us, oxybenzone and octinoxate. So this is from Senate Bill 2571. Toxic, how did this happen? Another quote from Hawaii Senate Bill 2571. Oxybenzone, the rise and fall. Back to the beginning. To understand how this got so out of hand, we have to go back to the beginning. I'm going to talk about Coco Chanel and the focus on UVB, which the rise of sunscreen, we were focused on UVB for 50 years, and it was only in 1977 that Kumakiri et al. Proved that ultraviolet A, UVA, rays could also cause negative changes in the ultrastructure of the skin. We now know that UVA rays are actually far more plentiful and far more dangerous than UVB rays. Furthermore, they're ever present. Quick explanation, because UVB rays are seasonal and based on altitude and latitude and longitude and time of the year, and they are blocked by windows and glass, and they have been the main focus for all this time, and that's what SPF stands for or represents, is solely the UVB rays. As I'm gesturing, I keep moving the camera, I'm sorry. But then we go into the regulations here, where with the rise of sunscreens, the FDA decided to regulate them. Good thing, yeah. However, they were regulating them with the thought that they were only being used by people going on vacation and only a small amount, and they were only concerned about protection from sunburns. And with that led to all that is fair and good, but with that also brought the confusion of people thinking that SPF measures total protection, and it doesn't. It's only sunburn, which is only a very, very, very small spectrum of UV radiation in total, which only makes up a very small percentage of total solar radiation, which we'll go into. But 1980s, we had a time of boom and excess, and on a side note, there's a huge correlation with things like this and the times, and a lack of concern of general health in favor of personal gain. And also people wanted to look as good as possible and didn't want to have the white cast with the zinc and titanium dioxide. So obviously chemical sunscreens were more popular because they spread out easier, and also sprays because it seems like they'd be easier, but the thing that people forget is that you have to rub sprays in. So then when you're rubbing the sprays in, then you're getting sunscreen all over your hands anyways. And like when we were in Hawaii, I saw that most people were, most people had their partner applying the spray sunscreen for them. And then there were some people that rubbed it in, like their partner would rub the spray in for them. And then it's like, okay, then why not just use a lotion? And there were some other people who all they did was, this was two girls, I think they were friends, but they just sprayed each other just all over the place. Like you could see the sunscreen mist just carrying everywhere. And this was on Hana Beach and in Maui. And they didn't rub it in. And Alex actually saw some people that were burned, like specific to spray squirts. And anyways, all right, but okay, here come the really important things here. All right. This actually probably works pretty well. Okay. So sun protection timeline. Here we talk about the sun protection timeline, and then so sunscreen was used, and like it had a very, very, very low UPF, or SPF, like estimated SPF of like 3 when it first came out. And then it was popularized in the 1960s. 1956 was the Copper Tone Girl. And then in 1974, so this is like 20 years later, right? That's when Greiter introduced the sun protection factor, SPF, to measure UVB protection, which again only stands for burn. And in 1977, so it was 3 years later, that researchers proved that UVA also causes damage to the skin. And then it was in 1978, so 1 year later, that the FDA proposed to regulate sunscreens, and they focused on UVB, which led to consequences down the road until now. And then oxybenzone and avobenzone are approved as chemical UVA filters. And already by 1990, oxybenzone was added to the High Production Volume Challenge program for manufacturing in or importing to the U.S. chemicals more than 1 million pounds per year in 1990. More than 1 million pounds per year were coming into or made in the U.S. of just oxybenzone, just the chemical oxybenzone, over 1 million pounds in 1990. And oxybenzone levels have only been rising. Think about that. And the problem is that because people often prefer clear, easy spray sunscreens, inadvertently, they often are picking sunscreens with oxybenzone because the majority of sunscreens have oxybenzone. Particularly if they are broad spectrum, then they'll probably have oxybenzone. And usually you think, oh, you know, my kid doesn't like sunscreen, so the only way I can get it on them is if we use a spray. But the problem is that most of those sprays have oxybenzone, and it's been proven to be unsuitable for children since 2006, and it can be more rapidly absorbed by children and is more toxic to children because they have more susceptibility to it, and it is really toxic to pregnant mothers. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, you should never be using products with oxybenzone, yet they don't really say this to people. And so lots of people are at risk from this, and they don't know about it. And so yeah, children don't have the metabolites to break down oxybenzone, and it has far more toxic byproducts, and it impacts development. So oxybenzone, which is also BP3, so benzophenone 3, which we learn here in part 2, and its byproduct is BP1, which is 5 times more toxic than oxybenzone. That's its breakdown product when it breaks down in your system. And so for kids, think about that. Like, and so then I show the history of use, which 1970s was the last safety review. This is like from before. But 1990, Schlumpf already found that oxybenzone may disrupt the hormone system, and that oxybenzone and its metabolites, the chemicals the body makes from oxybenzone in an attempt to detoxify it and excrete it, may disrupt the hormone system. That was in 1990. Under study conditions, oxybenzone and its metabolites cause weak estrogenic effects in 1990. But remember, they're already importing in or manufacturing 1 million pounds of this stuff a year. And 2002, sunlight causes oxybenzone to form free radicals, chemicals that may be linked to cell damage, which we'll get into deeper here in part 2 really soon. Because it's totally not surprising and completely characteristic for oxybenzone to do this because of everything that it is. And so obviously oxybenzone is going to react with sunlight and in the meantime produce free radicals, because that's the way that its parent chemical behaves as well. That's actually what its parent chemical is used for. That's the reason that it's used. So, and then 2003, oxybenzone causes anti-androgenic effects, which is the male sexual hormone. 2004, PONT, oxybenzone is a penetration enhancer, a chemical that helps other chemicals penetrate the skin. Janjua, 2004, human study co-applying oxybenzone 4-MBC and octinoxate showed a drop in testosterone levels in men and statistically significant declines in estradiol levels. I'm sorry, I don't know how to exactly pronounce that. Levels in men during a 1-week application period. It's 2004. It's like 25 years ago at this point. 2005, YE. Study detected oxybenzone in the urine of all 30 participants. Ziolkowska, 2006. Oxybenzone may affect the adrenal hormone system. Rodriguez, 2006. This is the one, and Gonzalez is the one I keep referring to, but also Rodriguez, in 2006, over 1/4 of 82 patients showed photoallergic reactions to oxybenzone. And then Bryden in 2006 found that 1 in 5 photoallergic reactions to oxybenzone. So that's 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. But actually, there's another study that when over a 10-year period, about 70% reacted positively, as in, like, they had allergic reactions during patch tests. 70% of people. All right, then we have Hansen, 2006, again. So reinforcing what Serpone said in 2002, sunlight causes oxybenzone to form free radical chemicals that may be linked to cell damage. Then Gonzalez, 2006, this is the famous study. Studies of human volunteers measured 4% excretion in urine. Other studies on human volunteers, like Hayden, 1997, John Joa, 2004, Savay, 2004, show some individuals absorbing at least 9% of the applied doses as measured by excretions in urine. Gonzalez found that many volunteers continued to excrete oxybenzone many days after the last application, showing its tendency to accumulate in fatty tissues of the body. Oxybenzone unsuitable for children. Children do not yet have the metabolites to break it down, and it causes greater risk. This is in 2006. So all these people that now are like, oh my goodness, really? These things can be absorbed. Oxybenzone is absorbed. It's like, yeah. We've known this for 22 years. What am I talking about? It's 2012. 12 years. Okay, wait. Okay. So, 2006, 13 years ago now, was when they found that for sure it's excreted in the urine and absorbed, and also that it may accumulate in the body 13 years ago, and that it's unsuitable for children 13 years ago, and just now people are starting to find out about it. Like, if I would not be heavily involved in this, I would still be using products with oxybenzone too, because they're clear, they're easy to use, you know? So, and if I were pregnant or had kids, I would be using these products on my kids too. And it's just like, they are so incredibly toxic, and people don't know about it. It's insane. So then we move on to 2008, where we see that oxybenzone is clearly a toxicant and a health risk. Oh, wait. So 2006 and 2007, oxybenzone and its metabolites cause estrogenic effects. Wolf, 2007, 96% of 6 to 8-year-old girls have detectable amounts of oxybenzone in their urine. Wolf, 2008. Mothers with high levels of oxybenzone in their bodies are more likely to give birth to underweight baby girls. Underweight baby girls. And low birth weight is a critical risk factor linked to coronary heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and other diseases in adulthood. Caliphate, 2008. The CDC publishes a study that 97% of Americans are contaminated with oxybenzone that has been linked to allergies, hormone disruption, and cell damage. 2008, 11 years ago. So 11 years ago, this report was published by the CDC, and all these other things before that had been published that already say the things that we now are truly finding out and are truly being confirmed and validated by mainstream channels. And so yeah, 11 years ago, all of this was known. And so clearly it's a toxicant and a health risk, and the EWG published this large thing that talks about how it's in 588 sunscreens and at least 567 other personal care products. Saying that a new study reveals that 97% of Americans are contaminated with a widely used sunscreen ingredient called oxybenzone that has been linked to allergies, hormone disruption, and cell damage. A companion study published one day earlier revealed that oxybenzone is linked to low birth weight in baby girls whose mothers are exposed during pregnancy. Oxybenzone is also a penetration enhancer, a chemical that helps other chemicals penetrate the skin. 2008. Again, 11 years ago. So all these things were known. So then EWG found it in 588 sunscreens. And then the FDA has, this is all a quote from the EWG from 2008. The Food and Drug Administration has failed miserably in its duty to protect the public. Here, I could probably just hold this. Yeah, there we go. The FDA has failed miserably in its duty to protect the public from toxic chemicals like oxybenzone in personal care products. At the request of industry lobbyists, including Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, who represented the Cosmetic Toiletry and Fragrance Association, the agency that has delayed final sunscreen safety standards for nearly 30 years, and the FDA issued a new draft of the standards last October under pressure from EWG, but continues to delay finalizing them at the behest of the regulated industry. Top scientists from CDC published results March 21st, 2001. Okay, we don't have to read that out loud. But again, savethecorals.club/oxybenzone. You'll find this all. Then they go on to say, FDA last reviewed the safety of oxybenzone in the 1970s, republishing its evaluation in 1978. At the same time, it announced plans to develop comprehensive standards for sunscreen safety and effectiveness. FDA 1978. 30 years later, the agency has yet to issue final regulations. Instead, it encourages manufacturers to follow the draft guidelines that the agency has delayed finalizing at the behest of the sunscreen industry. As a result, sunscreen manufacturers in the U.S. are free to market products containing ingredients like oxybenzone that have not been proven safe for people. So 2008, EWG says this. And it's pretty serious. So we go on to say, it was not until the early 2000s that oxybenzone's effects had started to become clear. And by then, there were few people in America who weren't contaminated with oxybenzone. 2008 proved it when the CDC did a study did a study of 2,500 people, 2,500 participants aged 6 and older, and found that an alarming 96.7% of them had detectable amounts of oxybenzone in their urine. Why is this happening? Everything about oxybenzone that makes it such a good photoprotector also makes it an endlessly toxic contaminant. So literally everything about it that makes it useful for what it does is exactly what makes it so extremely harmful. So here we go. And so these here are just like kind of some like drafts that I made into here, but we can read this because nice. So why is it used? It absorbs a lower range of UVA rays, which are shortwave UVB rays, 288 to 320 nanometers, and shortwave UVA rays, which are 320 to 940 nanometers, and it's very stable. And so how it works is that it absorbs UV radiation, and then what it produces is it spreads out the UV radiation and produces free radicals as a byproduct. And then the uses, it's most commonly used as a UV absorber in sunscreens and used in plastics as a UV absorber and stabilizer. And then it's used in makeup and other cosmetics, hairsprays, nail polish. And really key point is that it's readily absorbed orally and dermally, and it bioaccumulates. Really important things to know. So then we move on to part 2, which is really the continuation of part 1, but then after I did part 1, I decided to make this part 2 because otherwise it would just be so extraordinarily long, which it already is, but okay, so we look at benzophenone, which is oxybenzone's parent chemical. And I actually think that I've gone through this already in a different video. So I'll check if I have, because if I have, then I'm not going to go through it again, because it's now 9 o'clock. I have other things I'd like to do as well, and we still haven't even gotten to reading the article. Oops. But really important things are oxybenzone's properties, so how it reacts with the sun, and then how it reacts with water, and it's very lipophilic, and which means that it's insoluble in water, so it doesn't break down in water, it only breaks down in your fat cells. This is very important. And that means that it's rapidly absorbed, it stays in your system, so it's bioaccumulated. And then it's like, oh gosh, it's an endocrine disruptor too. And another really important page is what happens when we put oxybenzone on our body. I'll check this out. So it's readily absorbed orally and dermally. So immediately some is absorbed 4 to 10%, where it mimics estrogen. And then we break it down and excrete it. It can be detected in the urine within 20 minutes. And some accumulates in fat cells, and there it bioaccumulates and disrupts estrogen and leads to various negative consequences. And then that doesn't even begin to go into the flow of oxybenzone, which is down there, which is what happens afterwards, aka how it spreads throughout the entire environment. But then you go out into the sun, and like 1 in 4 people will develop a photoallergic reaction to it, a sunburn-like rash, and as it absorbs the sunlight, it creates chemical reactions on your skin and produces free radicals. So it's just like, how does that make any sense that you would want to use that? Everything is just, it doesn't make sense. Like, it makes total sense the way that it behaves, but it makes 0 sense to use it as a photoprotector for anybody who's trying to be safe about anything and trying to protect themselves. Like, if you're trying to protect yourself, this is the last thing that you should be using, because when anybody says that sunscreens like could lead to cancer, it's like oxybenzone is the only thing that legitimately could cause negative things to you, because it's really bad. Okay, so then, yeah, by 2008, we learned that it's rapidly absorbed, it's found in nearly all humans, it's unsuitable for children, and it's a potential endocrine disruptor. This is 11 years ago that we learned all of this, and still nobody hears about it. And it's still being broadly used, becoming more and more popular by the year. So then I go into, so as of now, actually, this is all that I've published, because as I think I said in a previous video, like, I am a perfectionist and just want to make everything like look good and nice and clean and everything. And this time, like, editing a little bit, because next is what is an endocrine disruptor, and then how big is the problem, why is oxybenzone so toxic, oxybenzone in humans, and then 2018. And then we have the next part, which is oxybenzone, and then this nice little lead up, which, I mean, again, I think I said this in the previous video, but like, honestly, this stuff is like basically ready to go, so I should really, really just publish it, or at least just publish the rough drafts, because it's really important to have this information up. And I mean, this is like 5 months of my life that I spent on this, and now it's just like, it's up on my walls and that's it. Which is another reason that I started doing these videos, was because I was like, this is still nowhere. It needs to be known. So really important, the higher the density of swimmers, the higher the oxybenzone levels. The higher the oxybenzone levels, the higher the mortality. But worse, they can't recover. And I took a lot of these down as I was making my coral postcards and everything. But universal effects, where there are high levels of oxybenzone, huge death rate, not reproducing, not growing back, aborted juvenile development, no recruitment of any species, behavioral changes, feminization, changes in sex ratios with 4 times as many females. Does this sound like something safe to you? You know, and then it's found everywhere. And then here we talk a little bit more about the effects and the flow of oxybenzone. And no matter where you are or what you do, it goes back into the ocean. And it affects everyone. It's found everywhere. Then we go into corals, which are an ecological necessity. And remember that oxybenzone is the greatest immediate threat to coral reefs today, because corals are able to rebuild after global bleaching events, but with oxybenzone, they can't recover. So lots of fun things here. Oh yeah, and then our bioaccumulation and our biomagnification, which is very important to understand. So, I mean, it all goes together and it all makes sense. It's just about making sense of it. And that takes a lot of insane dedication, which luckily I've done for you. So now the dots are all tied together. Well, mainly Craig Downs did all the work, but then I just put it together in a pretty way. And I'm recording super long videos about it. All right. So that's fantastic. And then the coral postcards. Wow, guys, we've done so well. Okay, so the amazing coral postcards. But these are the ones that I'm so proud of. Let's see the reflection, sorry. And I think that maybe again, I'll have to check if I've read all of these to you, because I know that I recorded a video while I was making them and also when they arrived, but I'm not sure if I recorded a video of me actually reading them, and we need to do that. But now, the ultimate drum roll. Okay, so now I'm going to read the CNN article and explain what's going on to you, and you'll be able to understand it much more clearly because you have some of the backstory, which again, savethecorals.club. And then a skimmed down version of it is on why every country should ban oxybenzone. That's more of kind of the style of the original, just research paper before I decided to make it into a magazine. But I made some really yummy vindaloo for dinner tonight, and I haven't eaten really any of it because I've been recording this video and I really want to do this video since it's basically my #1 priority right now. But now we only have one step to go, which is the actual article. So we're gonna take a short break and eat a little bit and refuel. So